Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And the comic that I'll be reading today is Superboy, issue number 203 from 1974. As far as my overall thoughts on the issue, I thought this was a good issue. This was definitely better than most of what DC was producing at the time. I would have enjoyed this as a reader. I would have been proud to spend my 20 cents as a 7-year-old and get this comic book. First thing I'm going to do is look at the cover. The cover is by Nick Cardy. He was DC's main cover book artist guy, as Gil Kane was at Marvel at the same time. Around the 1970s was really the peak of their artistic powers. This is a pretty good comic book cover. It's very much in line with what DC wanted to do, was rather than focus, say, on an action cover as Marvel would, DC would sort of try to create this kind of interesting scenario that would draw the reader in and motivate them into buying the comic because they wanted to read that story. Eventually, DC had flipped and they took the Marvel route approach to covers where it was just basically action. But at this time, I think Joe Orlando was the main editor, and he liked this because he came from the horror genre. Anyway, cover, we see the four main characters of the story. Superboy, because it's his title. Montel, who's the leader of the Legion at the time. And he's basically a stronger version of Superboy. We see Phantom Girl, who is a longtime popular member of the group, and Invisible Kid, who also longtime member, was one time Legion leader, and that's something that's voted on by the fans back then in the 60s. So he had some popularity too. And you see there's some type of danger going to attack them. They don't know what it is. And behind them we see an image of Valis, who's one of the Legion's more dangerous foes. He's probably their most physically imposing foe, as he can easily dispose of, Superboy and Montel in a one-on-one battle. So, without further ado, go into the story. The splash page is basically kind of a retelling of the cover. This was common in DC Comics, where some stories would basically start with kind of a redone version of the cover and letting you know this is the story you're going to be reading. That differed from Marvel, where Marvel just really went into the story with their splash pages. Now, DC, obviously, they took the Marvel method and they just changed the way they approached their splash pages. But at this time, this is fairly common. We see the creative team. It's let me get a drink first. Okay, so I'm gonna drink before I talk about the creative team. All right, this part's gonna be edited out. Excuse me, I was speaking with a dry voice for a while. Or I should say dry throat. Anyway, the creative team is Cary Bates. He's the guy who wrote this story. It's basically a Cary Bates story, but the story's very well structured. I don't remember any of his comics being particularly memorable. So I guess he would be kind of a journeyman in the trade. He's made a living as a writer for a long time, including working on screenplays. So it's hard for me to criticize him. But yeah, Cary made a lot of money being a mediocre writer. The artist is Mike Grell. Mike Grell, this is, I believe, his first solo outing, taking care of this title. The previous issue, I think he filled in for Dave Cockrum, who was the previous artist for the Legion, and I'll talk about the change in art team a little later, because the comic book talks about the change in art team. So anyway, this is Mike Grell's first effort. He does a really good job. There's a lot of Well drawn art here. Some of the faces look really nice. Um, Very much in the vein of Neil Adams. In fact, I'm sure Mike Rowe would basically admit, yeah, he was a Neil Adams clone at first. He was a very good one, though. Eventually, Grell developed his own style. So anyway, see the Legion. They're looking in this box. They're trying to figure out this is the secret of some type of attack. And here's Valis, ready to make mincemeat of us. And the story is Massacre by Remote Control. So we see the Legion headquarters. It's midnight. A group of intruders are breaking in. Kind of a mix between male and female, all in black. The only thing that distinguishes them are like these Roman numerals on their chest. Excuse me. Anyway, their intrusion is not undetected. It turns out there's some legionnaires on duty, specifically Montel, who's the leader of the group at the time. There's Superboy. He's probably he's visiting from the past. He's kind of haunting this future, I guess. And you see Sunboy, who's also one of the more powerful members of the Legion. They see the alarm goes off. They know there's intruders. So eventually the intruders break up. They have their own plans. And they're going deep into the headquarters. The intruders seem to be super powered, as they have the ability to break through the walls here. Eventually, one runs into Sunboy. So this intruder has been stopped. Next, two other intruders, they break into a wall, and they immediately run into Montel, who's not only the oldest member, he's also the most powerful member, and he's the leader. So he has something to prove here, and he immediately captures these two intruders using his super cape. He's basically an older version of Superboy. We see the last intruder. They broke into the Legion's museum. Hi there, just having a telecast. We see a intruder here, and he's breaking into the Legion's museum. See a statue of Pharaoh Lad. Pharaoh Lad was a member of the Legion. He was killed during his first mission, and the reason for that is Jim Shooter, who created this character, intended Pharaoh Lad to be the first black superhero in the DC universe. However, the editors nixed that idea, largely because of their own racism. And Jim Shooter, who was disappointed in this because he had African American friends and he knew they read comics and he wanted them to be represented too, he masked Pharaoh Lad and had him killed off in the first mission so DC couldn't use that character again. So Jim Shooter was like, if you're not going to use him the way I intended him, you're not going to use him, ever. So that's why this character was killed off. This works into the story also, the story structure. You see foreshadowing. Anyway, before I go back to the story, I see there's an ad for DC Comics, their subscription service. And we see like Superman, he's kind of hugging this mailman who kind of looks a little like Adolf Hitler. Which I always thought that was kind of weird. You're going to draw a mailman. Why make him look like that guy? I wonder if that could change history, if like Hitler just got like a civil service job and people were like complimenting his patents. Then maybe, he would have taken a different track in life. So much for that speculation. So anyway, going back to the story, we see the intruder. The intruder sets off some type of microchip, and it releases sort of an infrared effect. It's actually a pretty nice effect, inking effect. We see Montel and Sunboy, excuse me, they're like flying into the room. They're letting it be known, where is this coming from? However, Superboy, he's the first to burst into the museum, and the intruder turns out to be Element Lad, who's a member of the Legion. He's one of their more powerful members. So it looks like this was just a drill. And unfortunately, the Legionnaires on duty, they failed. So anyway, Element Lad and Superboy, they're like catching up. Again, like I mentioned, Super Superboy's kind of ghosting this future because Superman doesn't exist in this timeline. So at some point, Superman perished, but yet the 14-year-old version of Superman is just showing up in this future. But that must be weird. But I don't know if anyone thought about that. So anyway, they're discussing what went wrong. This is not usual. You guys are always on point. So anyway, it turns out the other members of the intruder team come in. I think it's Lightning Lad. He's also a very powerful member. There's Phantom Girl, who's one of the Legionnaires of focus in this story. And there's Karate Kid. Karate Kid's the other one. I'll talk about Karate Kid later because he actually turned out to be a valuable property for DC. Anyway, Montel comes in. He's totally pissed off. He was the guy in charge. He's like, who screwed up? Superboy and, Element Lad, they're looking as sexy as they can, but they don't got any answers. Montel finds out that it should have been Invisible Kid who should have handled that intruder. So they're looking around the museum. We see another drawing of Pharaoh Lad there. Again, foretelling or foreshadowing. Then we see some more foreshadowing as a particular display in the museum is highlighted. You see a voice, and then coming, and there's nothing there, and you see Invisible Kid materialize, and he's clearly injured. He's clearly injured, and he's taken to the medical lab to be examined because he came back unconscious. They want to find out what's happening to his friend. Brainiac 5 has this device where it can scan the most recent brain cells used. So he's trying to sort of recreate his last memories that are being stored in his head. Obviously, this is a little intrusive. It can be used badly, but in medical cases, yeah, that might be helpful information. So Brainiac 5 and Montel, they're intruding on their friend's memories, and it's being put on the big screen. So anyway, they noticed the world that he was in was actually very mystic, third dimensional, spooky. So anyway, they're watching the movie of his memories, and we see Invisible Kid, and he encounters this beautiful woman. She's a ghostly figure, but a ghostly figure of a beautiful woman. The two are interacting. It seems like Invisible Kid has deep feelings for her based on these drawings, and suddenly Montel and Brainiac are like, what the fuck is happening with the screen? And the screen blows out. It's like the drama and the trauma in those last few brain cells was so powerful, this guy's machine couldn't handle it. So anyway, Invisible Kid wakes up. They did get a little bit of information from those memories where they say, hey, we know this chick that you're seeing there, her name is Myla. He's like, bro, dude, that's not cool. You know about her. I don't want to talk about her to you guys. I feel violated. So that's basically the end of, I guess, the first act, because everyone's been introduced. We're going to take a look at the letters page. Now, what's going on in the letters page is that there's no feedback from previous issues, as someone would expect in the letters page, along with, what the kid wrote in, and of course the kid's name and address for anyone to read. Hopefully there was never any real bad interactions because of that policy. That lasted a long, long time. So anyway, the letters page is really more of a editorial notice, and What it's basically saying that we had a falling out with Dave Cockrum. The guy whose art you guys really liked, but was a total ingrate to us when we gave him the chance. So, and no one else did. So DC's being kind of a little catty here. What had happened was that Cockrum had drawn the issue number 200 of Superboy, of the wedding between two of the characters, Bouncing Boy and Dual Damsel. And he did this amazingly well drawn 2-page spread of the wedding. Cockrum was so proud of that artwork, he wanted the original art back. But the DC editors refused to do it. I don't know why, because they would normally sometimes they would give away original art just to business clients, I guess to impress the kids, as, for nothing. Or sometimes I think there was one point in DC in the 60s where you can go to their offices and ask for a piece of original art and they would just give it to you. Because you didn't have control over which art piece you were given, but still, it was something that showed that DC editorial did not really value the original art, so they were just kind of being dicks to Cockrum. Cockrum was so angry, he left DC for Marvel. Obviously, Dave Cockrum's biggest contribution there was helping to reboot the new X-Men. He also did a number of good art. He sadly passed away a few years ago. He actually met his wife in the letters page. So anyway, as they're bashing Cockrum, they're also playing up Mike Grell, letting the fans know that they'll get to know him a little better because we expect him to do this comic book for a long time. He had a great run. I enjoyed his Legion stuff. So Brainiac 5 and Montel, they're looking at this broken screen, trying to figure out what's going on. Brainiac 5 is talking something about nerve-shattering amnesia or something like that. So they're talking, they're wondering what's going on because they're very concerned about his performance since he was the one who kind of screwed up the drill. So anyway, we see Invisible Kid, now he's with Phantom Girl, and these two have a kind of a close they have a close relationship, a platonic relationship, because she's dating someone else in the group. And because they have similar powers, they sort of feel a kind of a kinship. Phantom Girl can't be invisible, but she can phase like a phantom through material. I don't know what that term is because it's a term that I guess science that doesn't exist. Anyway, it's kind of going through some nonsense about how Invisible Kid can also travel into this particular dimension. One thing I should note is that, again, these are really nicely drawn faces here. So Mike Grell put a lot of effort here. Again, we see some more good story structure. Foreshadowing, someone's going to die in this issue. And we also see a display of something called Robot Tharak's electronic brain. Tharak, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, he's the leader of the Legion's main super villain group against them, the Fatal Five. So those two are rivals. And it seems like in Thark, who's like half man, half robot, he was a scientist who crisped half of his body. So he used a robot technology to fix that one half of his body. So he's like half human, half robot. And they must have hated this guy to take like such a vital part of his being. Anyway, we see that Invisible Kid, he's talking about this girl because he loves this girl. And he's really into it. Very well drawn art here. It looks like it would be from like a rock album at the time. Invisible Kid looks like he has Ted Bundy eyes though. Okay, before I go back into the story, we see an ad for a music a music club, one of those mail order clubs where if you agree to sign up to be a member, you would get like, this music available to you like every month for this amount of money. And I remember my half sister had this in the late 70s, early 80s, and she hated it. They ended up getting financially hosed. They weren't savvy enough to commit the mail fraud you need to get this stuff for free. But holy crap, they hated those monthly bills, because I think you get the first few albums at a big discount, and then they hit you with these. You have to buy these premium priced records every month at X amount. Yeah, the ad here has a line where you can write in your credit card information for the people who had that. Okay, so we go back to the story. We see that Invisible Kid and Phantom Girl, they're still together. They're still in the museum, which is apparently where all the action is occurring in this story. He's saying, I'm going to marry this woman. I'm going to marry this woman. And next, we see the brain of Thark is pretty much well assembled. So it looks like it's well assembled. It's fully assembled because it was kind of assembling in parts, and now it looks like it's operational. One of the members, Dream Girl, I believe she was based on Marilyn Monroe. She has the power to have premonitions of the future in her sleep. So she sees that a huge danger is coming to the Legion in the form of Valis, who's probably the Legion's most imposing physical foe. He's mindless, and he doesn't have any agency unless Stark is controlling him. So this is creating a dilemma for them, because on one hand, they clearly believe that this is happening, but they don't understand how it's happening, since the one guy who controls him, he's out of the game conscious-wise. Anyway, see some really nice artwork with Montel, Superboy, Dream Girl, nicely drawn image of her. This is not a teenage girl. As far as ages at this time, Superboy was officially 14 at the time. The editorial decision by DC in the 1970s was that Superman is always 29 years old, and Superboy is always going to be 15 years younger than that, which is 14. And the errors would change, but we're not going to change the age of the characters. So they had to do this change because a lot of the fans of the title did not like Ma and Pa Kent looking like, Harry S. Truman and wife, because at that time the readers had much younger looking parents, and they wanted that to be represented. So that's sort of why the shifting errors with the Superboy title. So anyway, back to the story. Superboy and Montel, they're trying to figure out what's going on. They don't understand how it's happening, but Phantom Girl says it is. She's picking up she has the powers of telepathy, so she's picking up the signals, the brain waves, so she knows that he's somehow able to do this. The guys still don't understand this, because apparently that Thark was unconscious and he was just not physically a threat. Superboy's like, hey, I'll fly out to that space prison, check out what's happening. You get everything prepared here, leader. And that's exactly what happens. Superboy, he flies off. Montel's determined as ever. He's like, the failure to happen in that drill, it's not going to happen in the real thing. So anyway, Superboy's at the prison. Guards telling him, letting him know where Thark is at the moment. Looks a little bit like, Silence of the Lambs. A little brighter though. And we see Thark, he's undergoing some type of procedure. I guess if it's on his human side, it's an operation. I guess it's on his robot side, it's maintenance. So he's undergoing some maintenance here. and they see that the electronic brain is missing, because the Legionnaire just took it for themselves and said, we're gonna display this. This is how we're gonna humiliate this guy. So anyway, they see that Thark's unconscious either way, and they can't see how he is from this condition controlling Valis. And Superboy says, to the CO, hey, thanks for your service. The correction guard goes, hey, we're in the service of the 1%, even in the future. I go back to the story, see an ad for these big Treasury comics. I really liked them as kids. They were a lot of fun. I would not have picked these particular two, Wonder Woman and Tarzan, but nevertheless, I was always up for them. I think the reason they released these is that the distributor wanted the comic book companies to produce higher priced products. I think these caused problems for the newsstands because they weren't returnable. So whatever they didn't sell initially, they were stuck with. So some of these places had these treasuries for years, and they would try to sell them for like a deep discount. Anyway, Invisible Kid, he gets his last try. Notice the infantile language used here, as if readers of Superboy aren't as mature or as intelligent as the ones who are buying Batman at the time. He gets a try. Montel's asking him, hey dude, you feel like you're up to this? Because if you're not, we'll get someone else. We won't think anything bad about you. Invisible Kid says that's not a problem. Montel's like, I believe you, bro. I believe you. Same way we see a drawing here that looks very much a homage to that famous X-Men 59 splash page. And they're looking over the radar because Valis is about to fly in, about to break orbit. Superboy flies in, and he's on intercept course. He's making sure that Valis is not coming near his friends. Superboy thinks to himself he has an idea about what's happening, but rather than transmit that information to the headquarters, he's kind of saying, you know what, I can't, fuck that. I'm going right for Valis. Anyway, he does, and this is some really nice artwork here by Mike Grell. So Superboy, he's going right for Valis' head, and boom, electric shock, electric energy wave, overwhelms Superboy. He's knocked unconscious. Valis stops. He's able to grab Superboy and the unconscious Superboy, and he kind of flings him toward Earth. And the other legions are noticing, hold it, there's a bleep, and it's bleep, and bleep, and bleep, and it's getting closer and closer. And then, boom, Superboy is knocked unconscious. So one of their most powerful members is out for the count almost immediately. And then we see Valis breaking into the headquarters there. So most of the members who are there, oh, by the way, Karate Kid, Phantom Girl, Sunboy, Brainiac 5, they were in that particular area. Valis comes in. The only one who wasn't knocked out was Brainiac 5 and Phantom Girl. Oh no, the others, they wake up fast. And we see Sunboy and Karate Kid. They're about to tackle Valis. Karate Kid's hands are way too big. One thing about Karate Kid actually was a valuable property for DC at one point, because DC had the trademark on the term Karate Kid, which meant that most media could not use that term as a fictional character, because DC could enforce that trademark, or they could make a deal and get, say, royalties from a movie production company who wanted to make a film called The Karate Kid. So Karate Kid, the character, provided a nice steady income because of those Karate Kid movies. Eventually, DC's Karate Kid was killed off because the movie producers of the Karate Kid did not want any confusion between the characters. So basically, Karate Kid was killed off because of corporate edict. But nevertheless, he did what he was supposed to do. He created money for the company. Anyway, he's not having much luck against Valis. Some boy, he's having a little bit more success with Valis. However, it turns out his strategy backfires on him, and eventually Karate Kid and Some Boy are knocked out. Before we go back to the story, we see an in-house ad for some comic books that were out at the time. I do remember buying that Superman off the comic book stand. And I loved these two comics. Commandy, who was actually the most successful title for Jack Kirby at his time in DC. This is a great boy adventure. I loved these as a kid. Weird Adventure comics. These are Spectra comics, featuring this incredibly violent hero, and just all the torturous ways they come up to kill criminals. I think what happened, a writer or an editor got mugged, and he started having like these Death Wish type fantasies, and he used comic books to broadcast his psychosis. The last set of covers are horror comics. DC was much better at Marvel with their horror comics. Swamp Thing. This is the first comic after Bernie Wrightson had left. Those classic 10 issues, the first 10 issues. The Witching Hour. I would have bought that comic based on that cover with the big hat. And then we have Weird War Tales, which is basically a mix of horror and World War II. So it's like, zombie Nazis here. I bought a fair share of those comics too. So anyway, going back to the story, we see Phantom Girl. She's in the museum. She's looking around for Invisible Kid, which is weird. But she's wondering why she isn't up there getting his ass kicked too. It's really not like he could do a whole lot. So I'm not sure why she wants to drag him into it. Nevertheless, we see one of the more powerful members, Montel. He's approaching Valis from behind. Oddly drawn image of Valis because the legs are way too small. I think Mike Rowe made a rookie mistake. Montel's going right for Valis's head. He says, it's a punk move, but Valis is not going to say anything. He's not going to trash talk him, so he can kind of get away with it. Doesn't work. Valis detects Montel's presence, uses an electric bolt to render him unconscious. Next, we see the electronic brain. It's fully functional. It's shining bright. It's working on 1,000% power. And we see a thought bubble of someone who's noticed this. And who's noticed this is Invisible Kid. And Invisible Kid probably figured out what Superboy figured out earlier. That it was this electronic brain that's calling Valis, not the actual... not Thark's brain, but Thark's human brain, his electronic brain was doing it. Independent of the rest of the body. So anyway, he's trying to approach the case quietly. He's invisible. However, the brain is aware of its danger, and he sends Valis in to immediately handle it. Here's a really well-drawn image of Valis crushing Invisible Kid while at the same time Invisible Kid's crushing the electronic brain, and Invisible Kid wins out. He's able to break the brain, which then breaks control of Valis's will, and Valis kind of flies off because Valis has no agency on his own. The members of the Legion who are on the cover, they burst in. Superboy, Montel, Phantom Girl, I should say. They see Invisible Kid, he's unconscious. They make no effort whatsoever to get him to the medical lab or even give him CPR. They're like, hey, this guy, we'll let him go. It's okay. Superboy kind of pulls somewhat of a dick move. He mentions that Invisible Kid figured out what he did, and he airs this publicly. I mean, why are you taking glory away from your dead friend? I mean, let him have that one moment where he was the one guy who figured it out. You don't have to have this, like, you guys aren't looking at me enough. I figured it out too, So anyway, they're all sad. But then the image of the woman that Invisible Kid was visiting, Myla, she comes in. She explains that she had died, but her spiritual form was trapped in a dimension. So they're not really saying there's a life after death, but they're saying that someone's consciousness can exist when they pass away. So basically, she's saying, hey, he may be dead, but he's also happy because he's with me. They don't really have much evidence of this other than her word, but that's all they have. They have to take it. So anyway, we see Superboy, Phantom Girl, Montel. They're together. They're sad, but they're also happy. They know that their friend is in a somewhat better place, not as bad as it could be place. Anyway, that's the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to have more reviews up soon. Thank you and bye.